Today, we're joined by Jun Han, a visual storyteller with over 100,000 followers on Instagram and a talent for turning complex ideas into simple visuals. From a background in corporate sales to building a thriving business through visual communication, Jun Han shares how he built his audience, navigates imposter syndrome, and why creativity is more about thinking than drawing. If you've ever wondered how to turn your ideas into visuals that connect, this episode is for you. Hey, Junhan, what first inspired you to start creating content and pursuing entrepreneurship?
Um, this goes all the way back to the final year of my university. I was doing a bachelor's degree. It was a 4.5 years duration for me because I was doing double major. And towards the end, as you look forward to the next part of life, which beyond school, you have to look for a job, and it scares me a little to think that I have 40 years on average, 40 years ahead of me, where I'll be an employee forever. And somehow I just kept thinking, do I want to be an employee forever? and in my heart, it's no. The answer is no, right? Like, we need to make money, but I hope to do something beyond just being an employee for 40 years. And that led me to look around and look at what other people are doing. And it took a little bit of time. Uh, in fact, years before I landed up with what I have right now. I currently do uh, creative communications and marketing for people, specializing in visual communication. But it all started with writing book summary, blog posts, and then discovering how to write better, how to communicate better, and realizing that, hey, pictures can capture attention more effectively and so a lot more memorable. Then I pick up courses and read books along the way, and eventually that became my business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So you got into visual storytelling because of your own writing, and you noticed like, okay, it's easier or it's better to grab attention with a visual. How do you go about creating a visual from start to finish? What does your process looks like?
Well, the whole process, most of the process is about thinking. The drawing part is maybe 20% of the entire thing. So I got to look at an idea, whether it's an idea I pick up from a book or a podcast or a conversation or a client's concept, right? I take the concept, I understand it fully. And that means asking questions. That means thinking about the opposites or the contrast and then various different things, what it doesn't mean to different types of people, whether you are a business owner or your clients or just a friend that you are catching up with. I try to put myself in those different perspectives, and then I think, okay, how do I explain that? If I'm coming from different perspectives or angles, what is the common thread, and how can I say that concept in a way that it's super easy to understand? Especially if you
Mhm.
think about it from a coffee shop catch-up perspective. If you're talking to laypersons outside of your industry, how do you explain that so that, say, a 5-year-old kid or your mom can understand that? So I try to go for that sort of understanding before I find the visual representation to fit that concept.
Mhm. Yeah, it's crazy to see because the images themselves are they look great, but the concept is very simple, but the idea behind it, like the message that it brings, is so much deeper than that. So that's really cool to see. What were some challenges you faced from pivoting from your writing career to now visual storytelling?
Mm. I still write. In fact, I am trying to improve my storytelling. In my daily newsletter, every Saturday I write a story, whether that's something that happened to my life or a story I've seen or heard before or someone told me. Maybe it's a story from a friend. So I'm still very much writing. My pivot was actually from a sales career. I was doing corporate sales. Yeah. And I think that kind of helped because I understand when you work in sales, people don't have time for salespeople, right? Nobody wants to be interrupted by an ad or a cold call. So we really got to be sensitive enough to understand what people are looking for and what people don't want, and then choose the right message to talk about that. And I find that Drawing from that sales experience and my writing experience from previously, I was just writing ideas that I learned from books, summarizing it. People don't want a lot of stuff. They want to get the message like upfront directly in the shortest amount of time with the least effort. So that is the main thing that influence how I think to this day. When I'm coming out of ideas, a client can have a big idea. They could be telling me about it in person or over Zoom for
Mhm.
20, 30 minutes. And sometimes I'm able to capture that essence in 2 or 3 sentences. Now that
Mhm.
is the skill that I think I have mastered over time. And it's also a skill that more people should enjoy because it gets work done so much faster and so much more effectively.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We all use too many words sometimes to convey a message. Um, you started in sales, you were writing, you're still writing to this day. You create visuals. How do you get clients for this business? Where did you get your first clients from?
So my clients currently are 100% inbound leads, and maybe 1 out of 20 of them are referrals, but majority are inbound leads from social media. LinkedIn and Instagram are my main avenues. People see the works I publish, and then they connect the dots in their mind and say, "Oh, okay, I like this skill. I like the way this guy does it. Maybe he can do it for my business because maybe it's technical, or maybe they are trying something new, and they get me
Mhm.
to do that." But the first ever client, I think, came from my community. I picked up my skill from my teacher. His name is Yanis Ozolins. I'm not sure if you've seen his work. He's a much better visual storyteller than I am. His ideas are so sharp, really. So I picked up my skill from him, and people approach him all the time. A few years ago, people approach him and ask him, "Hey, can you do this for me?" And he's run out of capacity. He's just one person, and there's so many
Mhm.
more clients. So he referred us, the students, to potential clients, and somebody saw my work. They saw that my style or my approach fits what they were looking for, and that's how I earned my first freelance client. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. It's cool to see that you got clients referred from your teacher. I don't think that happens very often, so that's really cool to see. Right now, you're creating a lot of content, you get a lot of inbound leads. How did you get started with the creation of content, and how did you grew your audience over time?
Mm. So specifically for illustrations, when I paid for the course, I felt that it was an expensive investment, and I didn't want to waste it. I have so many books and courses that I've purchased and then left it because it didn't fit me or I got lazy and things like that. So my first thought when I made the payment was that, okay, if I'm committing to this, I need to commit this for at least 90 days. I need to produce something for 90 days. It's kind of like a job. What do you call it? The probation period for a job, right? You get hired to do the job for 3 months. The company assesses you and then decides whether to confirm you for a full-time permanent position. I adopted the same approach. I produce one illustration every single day to go online for 90 days. By the end of the 90 days, I've gone through enough difficult times and easy times. I've seen enough response to know that this is worth doing. Let me extend the experiment to 1 year. And I did that.
Mhm.
So along the course of this first year, I got inbound inquiries as well, not just from the referral. So as I create more content, it got distributed online and more people came to me. And I've got to
Yeah.
say that in the early days, this was back in 2022, um, the social media algorithms were a lot more friendly to um, static images. Right now, it's
Mhm.
very focused on reels, and I'm sure it's going to change in future. But when I started, it was very friendly for creators like me who created digital artworks and put them up online. I got a lot of sharing thanks to the algorithm.
Yeah. And how does it work with like static images to get seen? Like for the reels, you have a different feed where they just suggest you a lot of things. Is it
Mm.
the same with static images, or how does that go?
All I did, and it's the same thing I continue to do now. is to just create an image, publish it. I put in some hashtags where relevant. I share it to my stories. I put it up on various social media platforms, LinkedIn and Instagram being the main ones. And I just let the visual or the message get shared and reposted. So I like to think about it this way, that there are many technical tricks and processes that you can play with to feed the algorithm, to please the algorithm. But I think that's not really sustainable, because if you think about it, if we are taking the content, the piece of content, whatever it may be, writing, pictures, videos, we take it out of the context of a social media platform, will it still be popular? Will it still be attractive? Does the value or the message still stand? And I feel like my images, the visual metaphors that I create, or visual explanations of big concepts that I create, they continue to work in various platforms. I could use it in person in a lecture or a keynote presentation. I could, if I have it on my phone, I could show it at a coffee shop or when I'm at a networking event, that sort of thing. So I feel like focusing on the audience, on the message, is really a lot more powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
ideally, businesses, creators, entrepreneurs, you should focus on both the message and the medium. But I find that if I had to choose one, I'll focus a lot more on the message to make it super compelling so that it works on any platform. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a nice one. I think if it's right, then eventually the people will come to you from self and share it themselves to their feed, to their audience. How did you balance growing an audience while still keeping your content authentic, keeping it compelling? Because I can imagine if you start getting some traction and you see that some posts perform better than others, that you go all the way in that route, which is not always like the main message that you want to convey. Does it make sense what I'm asking here?
I think I know where you're going to.
Okay, amazing.
Um, my first viral illustration was unexpected. At that time, I think I have a few hundred likes at most for the average piece of illustration on a daily basis, and then this one got like 6,000. So for me, it's a really significant improvement. I call it viral, although it didn't really go into the millions, but it did exceptionally well. Now that piece of illustration was sitting in my drafts for a very long time, and I felt that it didn't really make sense. It wasn't very good, and that's why it's hidden. But I ran out of stuff to publish. Right, I was busy at a period of time, and I had to post something every day. That was my commitment, and I thought, okay, it doesn't matter. Let me just post it. At least I fulfill my requirement. It doesn't matter if I don't think it's that good, and I wake up the next day and realizing that it's super popular. So
Mm,
part of my answer to your question is sometimes we don't know what works, and sometimes on the other hand you think, or I've thought that there's some illustrations that's going to be super powerful and popular, it might go viral, and it didn't happen. So all of my
mhm,
viral ones, the ones that got 500,000 or more views and engagement, I didn't expect them to go and perform so well, and the ones that I thought would do well actually flopped. So uh,
mhm,
the I guess the process is to really just keep creating, keep explaining, and it works even if you're not in the creative field. If in marketing, or if you're explaining your business value and proposition, you need to just keep explaining what is it you do in a different way, and maybe that one angle that is just one out of 100 angles or approaches of talking about your work. That's the
mhm.
one that resonates with the right people, or that's the one that seems very ordinary but could resonate with a lot of people out there. So yeah, keep producing and keep publishing, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that you were in a busy period when you posted that one image, that visual. How does your day-to-day look like when creating content for yourself, but also for your clients, and having a course on the other side of that as well? How do you fit that in one day?
I like to do things in a way that they can become autopilot. So one good thing about my illustrations is that it's kind of timeless. There's no expiry date to them. They're generally content that people can do with a reminder with. Meaning to say, if I've seen it before and 6 months or 1 year later, I wouldn't mind seeing it again. It's a nice reminder. So I, in 2025, I've been reposting a lot of my old content that people resonate with. And then I try to produce new content as well because, hey, I go through life, I read books, talk to people, I get new ideas all the time. So I balance my publishing with old content, new content, and then client content. Well, they have that content for me, and then I'll just sit down and think about what I can produce for them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's a lot more heavy on client work. Sometimes it's a lot heavier on consumer content. The stuff I put on my social media, I call them consumer content. So it
Mm-hmm.
depends on what's the urgent or priority for the day or the week. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You have your own course as well to learn others how to start creating visual masterpieces. Where did that idea come from?
Mm. Well, that course is pre-recorded content, so 80% of it is written format. It's how I think, and how I feel like people should think about as well when they think about content and ideas. And 20% is video of me, demonstrating how I use my digital tools to create the pictures. Um, your question of was why did I decide to do a course?
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had to teach or attempt to teach my methods so that I become clearer on why I do things the way I do. And the main thing is to help myself think about how to produce the same quality or better illustrations over time. And if I'm clarifying my thoughts and ideas, why not just put it out there for people to benefit from as well? It's actually the same concept to why I started my book summary blog and my illustrations. I go through all this content and learn so many things. If I keep it in my notebook or note taking apps, then it's just going to be forgotten. If I put it out available for the world, then maybe it'll benefit more people. Same amount of work, but then reaches more people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. What was the biggest challenge from having all this information in your head on how to create visuals to really turning that into a teaching moment? Like, what is the hardest part about that?
Mm. Slowing down, I believe it's the mindfulness part of it. Slowing down to understand how did I arrive at this illustration, for example. Um, if I'm doing it on my own, I could be looking at the content that my client provided, whether it's in written format or over a call. Ideas just flash into my mind, but I have to look at it. Okay, I've got this idea. I think it works, but how did I arrive here? It's the picture is completely different from the words that's been written or spoken. I have to go and trace back. Okay, what led me to think about this metaphor, and what led to that thought? What other considerations were there? So I had to trace out the whole kind of timeline that happened in a flash, and then
Mhm.
extract the method and then write that down. Yeah.
Mm. Okay. Okay, nice. And are you currently growing the course differently than your client work, or how are you balancing that?
I have generally not promoted my course. It's available online. It's on my Instagram. I think I mentioned it on my LinkedIn as well, but I don't actively promote it. Um, I believe part of that is because of imposter syndrome. I
Mm,
always feel like when I look at other visual thinkers and visual storytellers out there, I'm not that good. but
mm,
I but then again, every time I review my course content, I think it works. So I put
mm,
it out there. Yeah. So fans who enjoy enough, who feel like they want to incorporate this skill into their communication toolbox, they pick up that course from me. Yeah.
mm.
It's pretty much a self-paced program, so it's people can take it up at any time and they can go through the content. But I have to
Yeah.
say though, I have been considering for over half a year of revamping that course, maybe do it in a cohort style with a live discussion kind of format instead of a written format. So that's something in the works. I might release it
Mm.
second half of the year or next year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. And it's cool to hear you speak about imposter syndrome. That's something that I experience sometimes as well. Um, I talked about it with my coach, and he told me, and we all know this, but it's just sometimes when you're in this feeling of feeling like an imposter, you forget all the solutions to fixing that. And what helps me is looking back on the results that I've gotten with my work. And I think, especially in your case, the fact that you've grown your audience with your visual masterpieces, like there's definitely no need to feel like an imposter. How do you still keep going while feeling like an imposter sometimes?
All right. I think I lost you there because of the internet connection, but I think we're back. Are we back?
Okay, we are
Okay.
back.
Back. Okay, great. Your question. How do I keep pushing even though I might feel the imposter syndrome? I think you're right. You've already answered the question. You look at all the past successes that you've had. For me, I draw the strength from the comments that people have given me about some of my illustrations. Comments like, "Oh, I needed to see this today," or "I showed it to my kid and she loved it," Or, and the other part of it is, I look at my list of clients. I have people who approach me to offer me money to do what I do for them, and at the end of it, they enjoy it. They say that it's good. They show me the results that of using it for their business, and it works. It works for them. So I think the imposter syndromes, I think it's normal for everyone, for most people. It still stays with me sometimes. But having these reminders of knowing where to look for your evidence of success, of worth, I think that helps balance against that, irrational fear of being not good enough.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's nice. Um, if you can give one lesson that you've learned in starting your business as how it is right now to somebody who wants to start themselves, what would you say to them?
Mm, wow, this is a difficult question. I would say try something. Most people would have a job, and that's where I started with. I had a corporate sales job that has nothing to do with creativity, nothing to do with design or marketing or communication. Maybe a little bit of marketing because I was in sales, but I was able to break away from employment to being self-employed and now having a team because I was trying something, because I started with the notion that I don't just want to be an employee. I want to try different things. I want to explore what's possible. And I think that that desire to try something new and something different from the mainstream, I think that was what helped because I've got friends who get burned out by the job and then they wish they could do something different. Or when they look at all the possible options out there, they're afraid because they've never tried it. It seems sensible, but they don't know if it's validated or not. I left my full-time job to do this uh, visual communication, visual marketing business because it's been validated by clients already. I was doing that with my full-time job, and I know that I just need to find more clients. I need to sharpen my positioning and marketing better to get a full-time income, full-time revenue. So I had that evidence in place. But all of that began by just exploring different things. And you might drop some experiments or some hobbies that don't fit you, that don't seem to make sense over the long term. But if you keep trying, there's a greater chance of finding something that could work for you. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you never know what that could be. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's nice. Do you ever struggle with burnout or a creative block? And how do you handle that?
Oh, burnout all the time. I have cycles of extreme productivity and then uh periods of really low productivity where I struggle to just get up and do the bare minimum. In those times, I'm happy to say that I'm able to take client deadlines seriously and then just do it. But for other things like content for social media, for my personal and audience consumption, those are dialed back down a lot. So productivity and cycles, it's always an up and down cycle for me. I know that I have this cycle uh, of productivity up and down over time, and so this is how I deal with it. My content is evergreen. I make sure that they are sensible, useful, and can be reposted over time. And I give this recommendation to businesses as well, whether they're startups or small, medium enterprises. You may not have the funds to engage a whole marketing agency forever, right? An ongoing basis to create fresh content, use once or twice, and then you have to keep producing new ones. So my advice has always been, okay, can we create something that you can keep using over and over again? Yeah. And I do that with my own business. I have a set of illustrations and social media posts that promotes my visual storytelling business. It's a set that runs over 3 months, twice a week, so 26 posts, right? And I publish it twice a week. By the end of 13 weeks, by the end of 3 months, we go back to the first post, and then that whole cycle repeats. Now, that means in a year, you post that 4 times. People see the same message 4 times a year. And of course, with 26 posts over 3 months, it doesn't feel like you are repeating yourself too much. So if you can create a set of materials that you can use over time, again and again, you free yourself up. You are feeding the machine. You're not required to be the slave to the machine, right? Like some people create content, it is only for this current moment or relevant for this month. And then the next month you've got to create something new all over again. You could do that. But I know my productivity cycle, I have my burnout cycles. So I create things that can be used over and over again for years. Same with my consumer content, the stuff that I feel like I could do with a reminder of. I repost them. People enjoy that. I have not received any complaints about, oh, I've seen this before yet. Yeah. So if it's possible, try to create batch work, this sort of thing, create a batch of this kind of content so that you can future proof yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, nice. What would you say is the biggest difference between a productive cycle and a not productive cycle? Like, what would be the reason that you go from the productive one to the not productive one?
Well, maybe I haven't been taking good care of myself when I'm productive. Sometimes when I am very driven, very motivated, I just get down to for weeks of maybe 12, 16 hours of really producing stuff or working on stuff. And I enjoy that very much, right? Like I'm in the zone, I love it. But then it's like machines, vehicles, you overheat, and then you have a very long cooldown period before you can use it again. So um, possibly I need to look at how I can build in, rest and relaxation even in my super productive states. Yeah. I'm not sure if this happens to anyone else, but yeah, when I get into the flow of like, oh, I've got a lot of things to write, a lot of ideas to illustrate, I just go one after the other, nonstop.
It's very relatable. That's for sure. And I like the analogy of a computer needing to cool down. Like, it totally makes sense. How has being an entrepreneur changed you from having a full-time job to who you are now as a person?
Mm. Well, there's a saying on the internet, I cannot remember who said it, but the saying goes, running your own business is the biggest self-help program there is. Yeah.
Mm.
And I agree because moving from being a 9 to 5 full-time employee with a very stable and safe income to doing what I do now, 100% responsible for what I'm bringing in, and that has taught me a lot about myself. It's taught me about how do I talk to people? What are my fears? Can I really hide behind emails? Or do I need to go and pick up the phone and call people? Or what other different ways there are? So I've been pushed to be innovative. I've been pushed to experiment with stuff. I've also changed my lifestyle. I used to work in sales. That meant sitting down in the office with my laptop, with my phone, doing my sales job. It's a 9 to 6 job, maybe 9 to 8 if I have to do extra work. But with creative work, when I my most creative times are not when I'm sitting at my laptop. I use my laptop to illustrate, but the most productive times, the times when I have the best ideas, are when I'm maybe outside queuing for coffee, or I'm on a train and I'm just looking around and I don't have seats and I'm just wondering, daydreaming, and then the ideas come in and connect with my client requirements, or comes in and connects with the thing that I've read 2 weeks ago, that sort of thing. So I've learned that, okay, lifestyle needs to adjust according to the work, or work needs to adjust according to the lifestyle. So I exercise a lot these days because I get a lot of ideas while I'm on the bicycle, or when I'm bouldering, that sort of stuff. So
Mm.
learning to be okay with different periods of productivity has been quite revealing to me. Like I might be doing work at 10 p.m. at night because the idea strikes at that moment. But 10 a.m. in the morning, where most people are supposed to be working,
Mm.
nothing is happening because I'm stuck. Yeah. So I
Mm.
have to let go and, just have my coffee, exercise, relax, that sort of thing. So going with the flow, I
Yeah.
guess, is one of the bigger lessons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. I'm very curious. I can imagine. I have the visual in my head of you wandering around on a train and there are no seats left. And if we take it to a conversation with one of your friends you're having and you have this one idea sparking out of that conversation, how do you keep the balance with staying in the moment in that conversation with the person ahead of you and thinking about, oh, this could be an amazing visual?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Mm.
Most of the time, I just tell my friends, okay, I need to write this down. This is gold,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
we might talk about that. Like they might be curious, oh, well, what did I say, right? And then
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you said this. This reminded me of that, and here's how I envision it. Sometimes I have the full, complete picture in my mind, and it's really clear. Sometimes it's a fuzzy idea. I got to bring back to workshop it further. But most of the time, people are pretty okay, right? Like I take notes with my phone. It's pretty common that,
Mhm.
unfortunately, pretty common that in conversations people still use their phone. So, but eventually we still get back to our conversations. And if
Yeah.
this is a client conversation, it's perfect because they're briefing me about what is it they do in their business, or explaining their product, and then I just zoom in on that moment. And then they get excited as well because they are co-creating the illustration with me to explain their business. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's fun that way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. You said sometimes you have a fuzzy idea that's not super clear yet. You need to workshop it.
Mm.
What do you mean with workshopping the idea? How does that look?
Well, that means I have to, sit down after that conversation, maybe look at my notes that I've taken, or my, Zoom video call recording, and think about why did I feel that moment of inspiration, right? Like, what's the first picture that came to mind, or what did it remind me of? And then try to link back to the bigger conversation. What is the main idea there? And sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? And I have to scrap it. Sometimes it needs to be changed or transformed a little bit into something else. So that message could be something that directly fits into what the client wants, or something that is entirely new. Then I get to propose this to the client. Yeah, and most of the time, maybe 7 out of 10 times, it makes sense to them, and then they'll adopt it as part of their communication kit that we
Mhm.
are working on. So yeah, so by
Yeah.
workshopping, I really just mean brainstorming and reviewing and refining the message. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Is there one lesson that you're learning, but you just keep learning it over and over, like it still happens and you recognize, ah, yeah, this is something that I need to fix. And then in a couple of weeks, you have the same feeling again?
Uh, that's a good question, and I don't think I have an answer to that. Like I'm constantly realizing that what I've written before, the text that goes along with my pictures,
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly realizing that I could have written it better, because when I'm reposting the old content again and I look at the story or the explanation I wrote a few months before, I always feel like that's terrible. Why did I even write that? But and I have a better version right now that I'll know that in a year's time I'm gonna look at this and realize that this is crap.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's probably because my writing is still something in progress, a skill that is still developing, or it may simply be that as we age, as we experience new things, we have a new view of things, a different experience, we naturally become better at thinking. So yeah, we have to keep iterating.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's a good sign if you see a post from a few months ago or a year ago, and you think to yourself like, "Oh, damn, this is actually not very well written." That means that you've grown and you've developed your skill. So it's definitely a nice part. Um, Lastly, I know you read a lot of books. Is there a book that you would recommend for someone who wants to start a business and they are not yet very sure of what they want to do or how they want to approach this?
Hmm. It's hard to talk about one specific book because it really depends on what kind of business that you're looking at. Like a few books come to mind, I guess, when it comes to business in general, right? So every business needs to sell, otherwise you won't be a business, you'll be a charity or be a hobby, right? You need to make money. And part of that is understanding how to communicate with people in a way that's not annoying. The first book I ever read about sales prospecting, cold calling, or cold emailing, it's called Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blount. There are scripts in there that could apply to almost all industries. I haven't seen an industry that couldn't do with some techniques or tactics from that book. Of course, adapt it to whatever business that you are doing. But I think it's good to learn how to reach out to strangers and propose ideas. Yeah,
Mm,
so that's one, right? A lot of my friends who start their own business, they're great at the craft. They're experts at certain things, but they could do better with finding clients. So that's one book that I'll recommend. The other one would probably be about how to tell stories and how to write properly, because you want people to feel fascinated by what you do. You want them to feel fascinated enough to read more or talk to you. So the book that I've read is called Very Good Copy by Eddie Sliner. He's a copywriter. He explains how to think like a advertising person, advertising creative director, or copywriter in a storytelling format.
mm.
It's super nice to read. It's very conversational. It's like a story, but yet I picked up a lot of lessons from there. So if you can learn to tell stories like he does, then your brand and positioning is going to stand out a lot more. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Thank you very much. Where can people connect with you and support your work?
Ah, the best way to connect with me is via LinkedIn. Or in fact, if you want to chat, just reach out to me by email, and I'll send you the email. You could share it with your audience. But
Okay.
emails are ideal because it gives me time to come back to you, especially if we are at different parts of the world, and it allows
Mhm.
me to write back a more considered response anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Jun Han, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Sam.